The Range Rover's tires had barely touched the faded yellow line when Officer Winters made his move. What should have ended with a citation spiraled into handcuffs, a fabricated charge, and Darius Carter, tech mogul and pillar of the community, thrown into a holding cell. Just another black man taught a lesson. Just another victim of the 8th Precinct, until Darius made one call that changed everything. As Chief Malcolm Hayes storms into the precinct to free his childhood friend, Deputy Commissioner Lane's meticulously crafted empire of corruption begins to fracture. The city's most powerful men are now locked in a lethal chess match where pawns keep turning up. Dead. They targeted the wrong man. They just don't know it yet. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Darius Carter pulled his black Range Rover into what appeared to be an open parking spot in front of Westside Coffee. It had been a good morning. The quarterly reports for his tech consulting firm showed growth despite the economic downturn, and he just closed a deal with a major healthcare provider. Darius stepped out of his vehicle, straightening his tailored navy suit. At 38, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built something from nothing. He glanced down at the parking spot, noticing the faded yellow lines that had nearly disappeared from years of traffic and weather. For a moment, he wondered if it was actually a valid spot, but seeing other cars parked in the same pattern, he shrugged it off. Inside Westside Coffee, the rich aroma of freshly ground beans greeted him as he entered. The barista, Lisa, all ready, started preparing his usual double espresso. "Morning, Mr. Carter." "The usual?" Lisa called over the hiss of the espresso machine. "You know it, and I've told you a dozen times to call me Darius," he replied with a warm smile. As Darius chatted with Lisa, Officer Brad Winters sat in his patrol car across the street, eyeing the Range Rover with undisguised contempt. At 26, Winters was eager to make his mark in the department. 3 years on the force, and he was still stuck writing parking tickets and responding to noise complaints. "Look at that," Winters muttered to himself, watching Darius enter the coffee shop. "Fancy car, fancy suit. Bet he thinks the rules don't apply to him," he radioed in. "Dispatch, Officer Winters. I'm issuing a citation for illegal parking on Main Street." "Copy that, Winters." Winters approached the Range Rover, circling it slowly, looking for additional violations. Finding none, he began writing the parking ticket with particular attention to detail. Inside the coffee shop, Darius glanced out the window and noticed the officer circling his vehicle. "I think I'm getting a ticket," Darius said to Lisa, frowning. "For what? Everyone parks there." "Apparently not today," Darius replied, placing his cup down. "I better go see what's up." Darius pushed through the door just as Winters was placing the ticket under his windshield wiper. "Excuse me, officer," Darius called out politely. "Is there a problem with my parking?" Winters turned, a slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Good morning, sir. You're parked in a no-parking zone." Darius glanced down at the faded lines, then back at the officer. "I'm sorry, but the lines are barely visible. I thought this was a legitimate spot." "Ignorance of the law isn't an excuse," Winters replied, his tone hardening. "The signage is clearly posted at the corner." Darius looked down the block. The sign was partially obscured by a tree branch, hardly visible from where he'd parked. "Officer, I understand you're doing your job, but that sign isn't clearly visible from here, and these lines are completely faded." Darius kept his voice even, reasonable. Winters' posture stiffened. "Sir, the ticket has already been issued. You can contest it in court if you have a problem with it." As their conversation continued, a second patrol car pulled up behind Darius's Range Rover. Officer Craig Sullivan, a veteran with 20 years on the force, stepped out. At 52, Sullivan had earned a reputation within the department, one that new officers quickly learned about. "Everything all right here, Winters?" Sullivan called out, approaching the pair with measured steps. "Just issuing a parking citation, sir," Winters replied, straightening slightly at his mentor's presence. Sullivan's cold blue eyes assessed Darius, taking in the expensive suit, the luxury vehicle, and the composed demeanor. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, This gentleman seems to think the rules don't apply to him, Winters added, his confidence bolstered by Sullivan's presence. I never said that, Darius interjected calmly. I simply pointed out that the parking restrictions aren't clearly marked. Sullivan stepped closer, invading Darius's personal space. Sir, are you refusing to accept the citation? No, Officer Sullivan, Darius replied, reading the nameplate. I'm trying to have a reasonable conversation about the circumstances. What's your name? Sullivan demanded, his tone shifting from professional to confrontational. Darius Carter. Sullivan's eyes narrowed slightly. ID, please. Darius hesitated. Am I being detained? I don't understand why you need my identification for a parking violation. When an officer asks for ID, you provide it, Sullivan snapped. That's the law. Darius knew his rights, but he also recognized the dangerous turn this conversation had taken. Slowly, he reached for his wallet. Carefully, Winters warned, his hand moving to rest on his holster. The gesture wasn't lost on Darius, who extracted his driver's license and handed it to Sullivan with deliberate calm. Sullivan studied the license longer than necessary. You're not from around here, are you, Mr. Carter? I've lived in this city for 12 years. My business is just 3 blocks from here. What kind of business? Sullivan's tone was laced with suspicion. Technology consulting. Carter Technologies. By now, several customers from the coffee shop had gathered outside, watching the interaction, with concern. Lisa stood at the door, her phone in hand, clearly recording the scene. Sullivan handed the license back to Darius. The fine is $75. Pay it within 30 days. Thank you, officer. I'll take care of it. Darius tucked his license away, ready to end the interaction. But Winters wasn't satisfied. Wait a minute. How do we know this vehicle belongs to him? Let's run the plates. Sullivan nodded, and Winters returned to his cruiser to check the registration. Is this really necessary? It's a parking ticket, Darius asked, feeling his patience wearing thin. Just doing our due diligence, Sullivan replied with a cold smile. Winters returned, his expression taut with excitement. The vehicle is registered to Carter Technologies. But there's an issue with the registration. What issue? Darius asked, genuinely confused. I renewed it last month. System shows it's pending. Technically, you shouldn't be driving this vehicle. That's impossible. I have the confirmation email and receipt. Darius reached for his phone. Sullivan's hand shot out, grabbing Darius's wrist. Stop right there. Keep your hands where I can see them. The sudden escalation sent a murmur through the growing crowd. Someone called out, "He's just getting his phone." Sullivan ignored the onlookers. Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands on the vehicle. For a parking ticket and a registration question? Darius asked incredulously. This is completely unnecessary. Are you resisting? Sullivan's voice hardened dangerously. Before Darius could respond, a third police cruiser arrived. Sergeant Miller, a heavy-set man with a perpetual scowl, emerged and quickly assessed the situation. What's the problem here, officers? Miller asked, his gaze shifting between Sullivan, Winters, and Darius. Sullivan responded, possible stolen vehicle. Registration irregularities. Subject is being uncooperative. I am not being uncooperative. Darius maintained his composure. This is my vehicle. The registration is current. Miller ignored Darius, turning to Sullivan. Proceed. With that single word, Sullivan grabbed Darius's arm, spinning him around and forcing him against the Range Rover's hood. The crowd's murmurs turned to shouts of protest. This is unnecessary, Darius insisted, his face pressed against the warm metal of his car. I've done nothing wrong. Stop resisting, Winters shouted, though Darius was clearly compliant. I'm not resisting, Darius replied, the indignity of the situation washing over him. Sullivan roughly pulled Darius's arms behind his back, cuffing him with unnecessary force. Darius Carter, you're under arrest for driving an unregistered vehicle and resisting arrest, Sullivan announced loudly, playing to the crowd. As they led him to the patrol car, Darius maintained his dignity. He looked at the crowd, many with phones raised recording the incident. Please send those videos to Carter Technologies, he called out calmly. My team will need them. Lisa stepped forward. I've got it all, Darius. I'm calling Trevor from the legal department right now. Sullivan shoved Darius into the back of the patrol car harder than necessary. As the door slammed shut, Darius caught a glimpse of the officers sharing satisfied looks. This wasn't about a parking spot or registration. This was something else entirely. The fluorescent lights of the 8th precinct buzzed overhead as Officer Sullivan yanked Darius from the back of the patrol car. The ride had been deliberately rough, Sullivan hitting every pothole, taking corners sharply, a petty display of power that Darius had endured in silence. Let's go, big shot, Sullivan growled, marching Darius through the rear entrance of the station. Inside, the precinct hummed with activity, phones ringing, officers at desks filing reports, the occasional shout across the room. A few officers glanced up as Sullivan paraded Darius through, their expressions ranging from indifference to thinly veiled disdain. At the booking desk, a heavy-set officer with thinning gray hair barely looked up from his computer. What have we got? Unregistered vehicle resisting arrest, Sullivan replied, pushing Darius forward. I did not resist arrest, Darius stated firmly. And my vehicle is properly registered. This is harassment. The booking officer finally looked up, his bored expression unchanged. Save it for the judge, pal. Darius was photographed, fingerprinted, and stripped of his belongings, wallet, watch, wedding ring, phone, and belt, each item cataloged with mechanical efficiency. Throughout the process, he maintained his composure, reciting his name and date of birth when asked, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. Processing cell 3, the booking officer finally said, nodding toward a door at the far end of the room. Sullivan gripped Darius's arm, steering him roughly down the corridor. They passed several holding cells, most empty at this hour, before reaching cell 3. Inside, a single occupant sat hunched on a bench, head in hands. Home sweet home, Sullivan sneered, removing the handcuffs with a deliberate twist that sent pain shooting through Darius's shoulders. Enjoy your stay. The cell door clanged shut, the sound reverberating through the concrete room. Darius rubbed his wrists, assessing the reddened skin where the cuffs had dug in. He turned to face his cellmate, a black man in his early 30s, dressed in jeans and a faded t-shirt. What are you in for? The man asked, eyeing Darius's expensive suit with curiosity. Parking ticket, Darius replied dryly. The man let out a humorless laugh. Must have been some parking ticket. It was. Apparently, parking while black is still a crime in this city. Darius extended his hand. Darius Carter, Reggie Washington. They shook hands. So, what really happened? Darius sat on the bench opposite Reggie, loosening his tie. Parked in front of a coffee shop where the lines were faded, officer took issue with it, then with me questioning the ticket, then suddenly my registration was suspicious. Next thing I know, I'm in cuffs. Reggie nodded knowingly. Sullivan and Winters? Darius looked up, surprised. How'd you know? Been there, done that. Reggie leaned back against the wall. They got a whole operation going. What do you mean? They target specific people, professionals, people with something to lose. They're not just racist, they're strategic. Strategic how? Before Reggie could answer, footsteps approached the cell. Lieutenant James Mason, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and cold eyes, stood outside, flanked by Winters and a young officer Darius hadn't seen before. Carter, Mason called out, his voice carrying authority earned through years of command. You've caused quite a stir this morning. Darius stood, approaching the bars. I'd like to know what I'm being charged with, Lieutenant. And I'd like to make my phone call. Mason's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. All in good time, Mr. Carter. All in good time. The law says... I know what the law says, Mason cut him off sharply. You'll get your call. But first we need to process your paperwork. He turned to the young officer. Johnson, handle the intake forms. Officer Johnson, a fresh-faced man who couldn't have been more than 25, nodded stiffly. Yes, sir, as... Mason walked away. Winters lingered, a smug smile playing on his lips. Comfortable, Carter. I hear the accommodations aren't quite up to your standards. Darius didn't take the bait. I'd like to make my phone call, Officer Winters. Like the lieutenant said, all in good time. Winters' smile widened. Maybe after lunch, or dinner. Who knows? Paperwork can be so unpredictable. After Winters departed, Officer Johnson approached the cell, clipboard in hand. Unlike the others, his demeanor was professional, almost apologetic. I need to ask you some questions for the intake form, Mr. Carter. Darius provided the requested information: address, employment, emergency contact. Throughout the exchange, Johnson avoided eye contact, his discomfort evident in the way he shifted his weight from foot to foot. When he finished, Johnson hesitated, glancing down the empty corridor. Your phone call. I'll try to expedite it. Before Darius could reply, Johnson hurried away. That one's new, Reggie observed once Johnson was out of earshot. Still has a conscience. What's your story? Darius asked, turning his attention back to his cellmate. Reggie sighed. Similar to yours. I own a barbershop on West Side. 3 locations now. Was driving my new Audi when Sullivan pulled me over. Said my taillight was out. It wasn't. Next thing, they're searching my car. Finding marijuana residue that magically appeared. 3rd time they've done it to me. 3rd? Yeah. First time was 2 years ago, then again last summer. Always the same crew. Sullivan, Winters with Mason running the show. Darius frowned. Why target you repeatedly? They want money, Reggie said simply. First time my lawyer fees cost me 20 grand. Second time they held me for 3 days. Lost a major catering contract for my wife's business. This time? He shrugged. We'll see what they want. But why not file a complaint? Get the media involved? Reggie's laugh was bitter. Man, you really don't know how deep this goes, do you? Last guy who filed a complaint. His business got raided by health inspectors every week for 6 months. Another one had his accounts frozen for a tax investigation that turned up nothing. They got people in every department in this city. Darius processed this information, the pieces starting to align. So it's not just racist police. It's a coordinated intimidation racket. Bingo, Reggie confirmed. They target successful black business owners. Make our lives hell until we pay up or move away. They call it community improvement. The conversation was interrupted by the return of Sullivan and Winters. They stood outside the cell, observing their captives with undisguised satisfaction. Having a nice chat? Sullivan asked mockingly. Just comparing notes, Darius replied coolly. Seems like you've established quite a pattern here. Sullivan's expression hardened. Careful, Carter. That mouth of yours is already in enough trouble. Eyed dots. Like to make my phone call now, it's been hours. Winters checked his watch with exaggerated movements. Has it? Time flies when you're having fun. Sullivan unlocked the cell. Fine. 1 call. Make it count. They led Darius to a desktop phone in an interview room, the door left deliberately, open so they could overhear. Sullivan smirked. No attorney can get you processed before morning anyway. Darius picked up the receiver, dialing a number from memory. After 2 rings, a deep voice answered, Chief Hayes speaking. Malcolm, it's Darius. There was a pause on the other end. Darius? Why are you calling my office line instead of my cell? I'm currently enjoying the hospitality of the 8th Precinct, Darius replied, keeping his tone neutral. Apparently, parking violations are now arrestable offenses. The silence on the other end was deafening. When Malcolm Hayes spoke again, his voice had dropped an octave, tight with controlled anger. What officers? Sullivan and Winters. Lieutenant Mason is supervising. Another pause. Don't say another word. To anyone. I'm on my way. The line went dead. Sullivan, who had been listening, approached with narrowed eyes. Who was that? 1 phone call, Darius replied evenly. As is my right. Sullivan grabbed Darius's arm, nails digging in. I asked who you called. An interested party. Sullivan's grip tightened painfully. You think you're smart? Let's see how smart you feel after a night in the tank. They returned to the holding cell, Sullivan shoving Darius inside with unnecessary force. As the door clanged shut, Winters approached, his face flushed with anger. You made a mistake, he hissed through the bars. Whatever you think is going to happen, it won't. After they departed, Reggie whistled low. You got them spooked. Who'd you call? The governor? Better, Darius replied, straightening his rumpled jacket. I called the chief of police. Reggie's eyes widened. Chief Hayes, you know him? Since we were 8 years old. We grew up together in the same housing project. Been best friends ever. Since, a slow smile spread across Reggie's face. Oh man, Sullivan and Winters have no idea what's coming, do they? No, Darius said grimly. They don't. In the administrative section of the precinct, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Sullivan burst into the break room where Mason was pouring coffee, his face flushed. We've got a problem, Sullivan announced, voice low. Carter called Hayes. Mason's cup paused midway to his lips. Chief Hayes? They're friends, apparently. Mason set the cup down, coffee sloshing over the rim. Damn it, Sullivan. I told you to check his connections before bringing him in. How was I supposed to know? He's buddies with the chief? Sullivan defended. He's just another rich guy in a fancy car. Mason pinched the bridge of his nose. Call Lane, now. Sullivan retrieved his phone, stepping into the corner. After a brief exchange, he handed the phone to Mason. Mason, Deputy Commissioner Gregory Lane's smooth voice came through the speaker. I understand we have a situation. Carter called. Hayes, Mason stated flatly. They're apparently close. Lane's chuckle was devoid of humor. Is that all? I was worried it might be something serious. Sir, with all due respect, Hayes could be here any minute. Let him come, Lane replied with casual confidence. Carter violated the law. The arrest is legitimate. On paper, yes, but then there's no problem, Lane interrupted. Hayes can't interfere with a lawful arrest without compromising his position. He knows that. And if he ignores protocol? Lane's voice hardened. Then he'll be giving me exactly what I need to recommend his removal. Either way, this works in our favor. As Mason continued his conversation with Lane, Officer Johnson lingered in the hallway listening. His expression grew increasingly troubled as he heard Mason detailing how they would handle Hayes' arrival. When Sullivan emerged from the break room, Johnson quickly busied himself with paperwork, but his mind raced with the implications of what he'd overheard. Back in the holding cell, Darius explained his history with Hayes to Reggie. We came up together in Eastside Gardens. His mother worked 2 jobs, hospital during the day, cleaning offices at night. My dad ran the community center before he passed. Malcolm practically lived at our place during high school. We went to different colleges but stayed close. He went into law enforcement, I went into tech. But the bond never broke. And now he's the chief, Reggie marveled. That's some serious backup. Malcolm is a good man, Darius said firmly. One of the best I know. He's been fighting to reform this department since he joined. Made a lot of enemies doing it too. Including Lane, Reggie noted. Darius looked up sharply. You know about Lane? Everyone in my neighborhood knows. Deputy Commissioner Lane is the reason these cops think they're untouchable. Word is, he's got half the city officials in his pocket. The precinct grew unusually quiet, the normal bustle replaced by tense anticipation. Officers gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones, casting occasional glances toward the holding cells. Something was coming, and everyone knew it. Darius sat perfectly still, his outward calm belying the storm of thoughts within. This had escalated far beyond a parking ticket or even a wrongful arrest. He'd inadvertently stepped into a war. One that had apparently been raging behind the scenes for years. A battle between corrupt officers protecting their power and those fighting for a just system. The sound of the precinct doors bursting open echoed down the corridor. Raised voices followed. Authoritative commands met with defensive responses. Then, distinct among the chaos, a familiar voice that carried both power and barely contained fury. Where is he? Chief Malcolm Hayes demanded. Where is Darius Carter? Darius and Reggie exchanged looks. The chief had arrived, and the real battle was about to begin. The echo of Chief Malcolm Hayes's commanding voice still hung in the air as Darius sat up straighter in the holding cell. His childhood friend's arrival changed everything, though whether for better or worse remained to be seen. "Your friend's about to walk into a hornet's nest," Reggie commented, leaning forward. "Malcolm knows what he's doing," Darius replied, though concern edged his voice. "He didn't get to be chief by being naive." They fell silent, straining to hear the confrontation unfolding beyond their view. Through the concrete walls they caught fragments, Hayes demanding explanations, Mason's defensive responses, voices rising and falling in tense exchange. In the precinct's main area, Chief Hayes stood with military posture, his dark suit impeccable, his presence filling the room. At 40, Hayes had the bearing of a man accustomed to authority, his eyes sharp and assessing beneath a close-cropped hairline. The silver badge on his belt gleamed under fluorescent lighting, a symbol of the power he wielded, and the responsibility that came with it. "Lieutenant Mason," Hayes's voice cut through the sudden silence of the precinct. "I'm still waiting for an explanation. Why is Darius Carter in a holding cell over a parking citation?" Mason stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "Chief, with all due respect, Mr. Carter was arrested for driving an unregistered vehicle and resisting arrest. The initial contact was regarding improper parking, but the situation escalated." "Escalated how?" Hayes asked, his tone dangerously calm. "He became confrontational when asked for identification," Sullivan interjected, joining Mason. "We followed protocol." Hayes's gaze shifted to Sullivan, taking in the veteran officer's defensive stance. "Your body cam footage will confirm that, I assume?" A flicker of unease crossed Sullivan's face. "My camera malfunctioned during the encounter. And yours, Officer Winters?" Winters straightened. "Same issue, sir. Technical malfunction." Hayes's expression hardened. What a remarkable coincidence. 2 camera failures during the same arrest. The precinct had gone utterly still, every officer watching the confrontation with wary eyes. This wasn't just about one arrest. It was a power struggle playing out in real time, with careers and reputations hanging in the balance. "I want to see Carter, now," Hayes demanded. Mason hesitated. "Sir, he's still being processed." "Now, Lieutenant." The command left no room for argument. Mason nodded stiffly and motioned to an officer. "Bring Carter from holding." As they waited, Hayes surveyed the room. Most officers avoided his gaze, suddenly busy with paperwork or hushed conversations. Only Officer Johnson met his eyes directly, a silent message passing between them. The holding cell door opened, and Darius emerged, escorted by a uniformed officer. Despite hours in custody, he maintained his dignity, back straight, expression composed. When he spotted Hayes, relief briefly softened his features. "Are you all right?" Hayes asked, stepping forward. "I've had better days," Darius replied with grim humor. Hayes turned to Mason. "Release him, immediately." "Chief," Mason began, "protocol dictates—" "I'm familiar with protocol, Lieutenant," Hayes cut in. "I'm also familiar with harassment and racial profiling. Release him now, or explain to Internal Affairs why you refused a direct order." The tension in the room thickened. Mason and Sullivan exchanged glances, a silent calculation passing between them. Before Mason could respond, the precinct doors opened again. Deputy Commissioner Gregory Lane strode in, his presence commanding immediate attention. Tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, Lane projected authority and confidence. At 55, his silver hair and patrician features gave him the air of a distinguished statesman rather than a cop. "Chief Hayes," Lane called out, his voice smooth and controlled. "I thought I might find you here." Hayes turned, his expression revealing nothing. "Commissioner, I wasn't aware this situation required your attention. When the chief of police personally intervenes in a routine arrest, it becomes my concern." Lane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps we should discuss this in private." "There's nothing to discuss. Mr. Carter is being released." Lane stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Malcolm, think carefully about what you're doing. This department operates on procedure and chain of command. You're undermining both. What I'm undermining is a clear case of police misconduct, Hayes replied, matching Lane's hushed tone. We both know what's happening here. Do we? Lane's smile tightened. What I see is a chief allowing personal relationships to cloud his judgment. Their eyes locked in silent challenge. Everyone in the room sensed the invisible lines being drawn, the battle shifting from Darius's arrest to something much larger. Darius, Hayes called, breaking eye contact with Lane. You're free to go. We'll discuss the details of this incident later. Lane's expression darkened. Chief Hayes, you're overstepping. No, Commissioner. I'm doing my job. Hayes turned to Mason. Process Mr. Carter's release, now. Mason hesitated, caught between the two highest-ranking officials in the department. After a tense moment, he nodded to an officer. Process him out. Lane's composure slipped for just a second, anger flashing across his features before the mask of professional detachment returned. This isn't over, Malcolm. No, Hayes agreed quietly. It isn't. As Darius was led away to retrieve his belongings, Hayes and Lane continued their standoff in the center of the precinct, neither willing to concede ground. The watching officers sensed the seismic shift occurring. Whatever happened next would reshape the department's power structure. In the property room, Officer Johnson handed Darius his personal effects. Sir, he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. Be careful, they won't let this go. Darius studied the young officer. Why are you helping me? Johnson's eyes darted nervously toward the door. Because I became a cop to protect people, not to harass them. What happened today? It's not right. Then do something about it, Darius urged, keeping his voice low. The chief needs allies he can trust. Johnson nodded once before slipping away, leaving Darius to wonder if he'd found an unexpected ally, or merely a momentary conscience in a corrupt system. Back in the holding area, Reggie remained in the cell, watching Darius's release with a mixture of admiration and resignation. As Darius passed, he called out, Don't forget about the rest of us, man. Darius paused. I won't. That's a promise. Outside, Hayes led Darius to his unmarked department vehicle, checking his friend for visible injuries. Did they hurt you? Nothing physical, Darius assured him. But Malcolm, what I saw in there, what I heard from another detainee, this goes beyond one bad arrest. Hayes's jaw tightened. I know. Get in. We'll talk somewhere secure. As they drove away from the precinct, neither man noticed the unmarked car that pulled out behind them, maintaining a careful distance. 20 minutes later, they sat in Hayes's office at police headquarters, the door locked, blinds drawn. Hayes poured 2 fingers of bourbon from a desk drawer, sliding one glass toward Darius. Tell me everything, Hayes said, leaning forward. Darius recounted the entire incident, the parking ticket, the escalation, the arrest, but more importantly, what he'd learned from Reggie. It's a pattern, Malcolm. They're targeting successful black business owners. Harassment, false charges, intimidation. Darius's voice hardened. It's a coordinated effort. Hayes nodded grimly. I've suspected something like this for months, but the complaints always disappear. Witnesses recant. Evidence vanishes. He took a long sip of bourbon. Lane's tentacles reach into every department in this city. Reggie said they cause problems until people pay up or leave town. Called it community improvement. Gentrification by intimidation. Hayes muttered. Classic Lane. He's been pushing for urban renewal in traditionally black neighborhoods for years. On the surface, it's about economic development. In reality, it's about pushing us out, Darius finished. But why? What does Lane get from this? Hayes set down his glass. Money, power, political capital. The real estate developers backing these projects make millions when neighborhoods turn around. Lane gets kickbacks, investments in his family businesses, campaign donations for his political allies. The officers doing his dirty work get promotions, overtime, special assignments, and no one stops them? People have tried. Hayes's expression darkened. The last assistant DA who looked into Lane's operations was found with child pornography on his computer. Career destroyed, case dropped. The internal affairs sergeant who started investigating Sullivan and his crew? His wife's business was hit with health code violations until it went bankrupt. His daughter lost her college scholarship. He transferred to traffic division within months. Darius absorbed this, the implications sinking in. So me getting arrested wasn't random. I doubt it. Your company's been in the news lately. That hospital contract, the expansion plans. You're exactly the kind of successful black entrepreneur they target. Hayes leaned back, studying his friend. But they made a mistake going after you. Because I know you? Because we know each other, Hayes corrected, and because neither of us backs down from a fight. Darius swirled the amber liquid in his glass. What happens now? Now, Hayes said, determination hardening his voice. We fight back. But you need to understand, Darius, these people are dangerous. Lane won't stop at threats or intimidation. He'll destroy anyone who threatens his operation. I'm not afraid. You should be, Hayes countered. But being afraid doesn't mean we don't act. It means we act smart. He pulled out a notepad. Tell me about this Officer Johnson. As Darius detailed his interactions with the young officer, Hayes took notes. He could be valuable, an inside source, but he'll need protection. Their planning was interrupted by Hayes's phone buzzing. He checked the screen, his expression growing grim. Lane, Darius guessed. Mayor's office. Lane works fast. Hayes stood. I need to take this. Wait here. While Hayes stepped into an adjoining room, Darius pulled out his own phone, scrolling through dozens of missed calls and messages from his wife, his business partner, his attorney. As he began returning texts, a new message appeared from an unknown number. They're watching you. The coffee shop wasn't random. Be careful. Darius stared at the cryptic warning, unease settling over him. Before he could respond, the message disappeared, deleted remotely. Hayes returned, his expression tense. The mayor wants to see me. Lane's spinning this as a case of me abusing my position to help a friend. That's ridiculous. It's politics. Hayes sighed. Darius, you should go home, check on your family. This is just beginning. What about you? I'll handle the mayor, but we need to move carefully from here. Lane's operation has been running unchecked for years. He won't give it up without a fight. Meanwhile, in Lane's spacious office overlooking the city, the deputy commissioner held court. Sullivan, Winters, and Mason stood before his desk like schoolboys called to the principal's office. You arrested the chief's best friend, Lane stated, his voice deceptively calm. Without clearing it with me first, Sullivan shifted uncomfortably. We didn't know they were connected. That's the problem, isn't it? Lane leaned forward. You didn't know. In our business, ignorance isn't just dangerous, it's potentially fatal. Sir, Mason interjected. We followed procedure. The arrest was clean. Clean. Lane's laugh was cold. Hayes walked into my precinct and took your prisoner without resistance. That's not clean, Lieutenant. That's a mess. Winters, sweating visibly, spoke up. What happens now, sir? Lane studied each man in turn, his gaze calculating. Now we contain the damage. Mason, pull every record of Carter's arrest from the system. Sullivan, find our contact at the DA's office. Make sure any complaint Carter files disappears. Winters, you've become a liability, the young officer blanched. Sir, you're on administrative leave, effective immediately. But sir, pending investigation of alleged excessive force, Lane continued as if Winters hadn't spoken. For your protection, of course. After dismissing Winters, Lane turned to the remaining officers. Hayes won't let this go. He's been looking for a way to come after me for years. This time he thinks he's found it. What do you need from us? Mason asked. Everything on Hayes. His movements, his contacts, his vulnerabilities. Lane's eyes hardened. And I want Carter watched. Every move, every call, every meeting. And if Hayes notices, he'll notice. Lane said dismissively. Let him. It'll keep him reactive instead of proactive. Sullivan leaned forward. What about the business? Our special operations? Proceed as usual, but carefully. No new targets until this blows over. Lane stood, signaling, the meeting's end. And find me something on Hayes. Everyone has secrets, even the righteous chief. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Darius's home office as he reviewed security footage from his business. After his release the previous day, he'd returned home to his worried wife, Vanessa, explaining the situation in careful terms to avoid alarming her further. But as dawn broke, he found himself searching for answers and evidence. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Through the security monitor, he spotted Hayes on his doorstep, dressed in civilian clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt instead of his usual suit. The casual attire couldn't disguise the tension in his friend's posture. Darius opened the door. You look like hell. Good morning to you too, Hayes replied with a tired smile. Can I come in? In the kitchen, Vanessa poured coffee for them before, discreetly leaving the two men alone. How'd it go with the mayor? Darius asked once they were seated. Hayes grimaced. About as expected. He's concerned about appearances and procedural integrity. Translation. Lane got to him first. He's not backing you? Politically, it's safer to stay neutral. Hayes sipped his coffee. But he didn't order me to back off either, which tells me Lane doesn't have as much leverage with him as he thinks. Darius nodded toward his laptop. I've been reviewing my company's security logs. Someone accessed our system 3 days ago, before my arrest. Hayes leaned forward. You were targeted. Looks that way. They were searching financial records, client lists, property holdings. Darius's expression hardened. This wasn't random, Malcolm. They were gathering intelligence. The conversation halted as Darius's phone rang, his attorney, Trevor Washington. Trevor, what's up? Darius listened intently, his expression darkening. When? Are you sure? No, don't do anything yet, I'll handle it. He ended the call, turning to Hayes with grim determination. That was my lawyer. The charges against me weren't dropped, they've been escalated. Now they're claiming they found cocaine residue in my vehicle. Hayes set down his cup with deliberate care. They're manufacturing evidence. Trevor says there's a warrant for my arrest being processed right now. Lane's moving faster than I anticipated. Hayes stood. We need to go to the precinct immediately. To do what? To confront this head-on, before they send officers to arrest you here in front of your family. Vanessa entered, having overheard the conversation. Darius, what's happening? They're trying to frame me, Darius explained, embracing his wife. Malcolm and I are going to handle it. I'm coming with you, she insisted. No, both men said simultaneously. Hayes continued gently. Vanessa, I need you to call this number. He wrote down a contact. It's a trusted colleague at the DA's office. Tell her what's happening. She can slow down the warrant process. Reluctantly, Vanessa agreed. As Darius and Hayes prepared to leave, she gripped her husband's arm. Be careful, both of you. The drive to the 8th precinct was tense, both men strategizing their approach. Lane's trying to force my hand, Hayes said as they pulled into the parking lot. This bogus charge is designed to create a public confrontation. Then let's give him one, Darius replied, but on our terms. They entered the precinct, Hayes now in full chief regalia, uniform, badge, the physical embodiment of his authority. The front desk officer's eyes widened at their appearance. Chief Hayes, she stammered. We weren't expecting you. Lieutenant Mason, Hayes demanded. Where is he? In his office, sir. Hayes strode through the precinct, Darius at his side. Officers stopped mid-conversation, watching their progress with wary eyes. They reached Mason's office, Hayes entering without knocking. Mason looked up from his desk, surprise quickly masked by professional detachment. Chief, this is unexpected. Drop the act, Lieutenant, Hayes said coldly. I know about the cocaine charge you're trying to fabricate against Mr. Carter. Mason's gaze flickered to Darius before returning to Hayes. I'm not sure what you're referring to, sir. Let me be perfectly clear, Hayes continued, closing the door. This ends now. The original charges were baseless. These new allegations are criminal. With all due respect, sir, that's not your determination to make. If evidence was found, evidence? Hayes's laugh was harsh. We both know what this is, Mason. Lane is using you and your officers to target a private citizen because of his connection to me. Mason stood, his composure slipping. You're out of line, Chief. This is my precinct, and we follow procedure here. Procedure? Darius interjected. Is manufacturing evidence against innocent citizens part of your procedure, Lieutenant? The door opened behind them, and Sullivan entered, freezing momentarily at the sight of Hayes and Darius. Perfect timing, Officer Sullivan, Hayes said without turning. We were just discussing the mysterious cocaine that appeared in Mr. Carter's vehicle after it was in police custody. Sullivan's face remained impassive. Sir, I'm not involved in the evidence processing for that case. Of course not, Hayes replied sarcastically. Just like your body cam wasn't involved in recording the arrest. The tension in the room was palpable. Mason and Sullivan exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Hayes stepped closer to Mason. Here's what's going to happen. All charges against Mr. Carter will be dropped immediately. The officers involved in his arrest will be placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation by Internal Affairs. You don't have the authority, Mason began. I'm the chief of police, Hayes cut him off. That's exactly the authority I have. The standoff was interrupted by a new arrival, Deputy Commissioner Lane, his timing too perfect to be coincidental. He surveyed the scene with calculated calm. Chief Hayes, Lane greeted smoothly. Making personal visits to precincts now. How dedicated. Commissioner, Hayes acknowledged coldly. I'm addressing a case of apparent evidence tampering and police misconduct. Lane raised an eyebrow. Serious allegations. Do you have proof? We both know what's happening here. What I know, Lane replied, moving further into the room, is that you're personally involving yourself in a case concerning your friend. Again, that's a conflict of interest, Malcolm. Hayes didn't back down. The conflict is your officers targeting citizens based on race and personal connections. Lane's smile was thin. Careful, Chief. Accusations of racial profiling require substantial evidence. Without it, you're undermining department morale and public trust. The power dynamics shifted with Lane's arrival. Mason and Sullivan straightened, their confidence visibly returning now that their protector was present. Mr. Carter was lawfully arrested, Lane continued. If additional evidence was discovered during processing of his vehicle, that's standard procedure. Evidence that mysteriously appeared after the vehicle was in police custody? Darius challenged. Lane turned to him, eyes cold. Mr. Carter, you're here as a courtesy because the chief brought you. That courtesy can be revoked. This is a police matter now. Hayes stepped between them. The only police matter here is corruption, Commissioner, and I intend to root it out. Noble sentiments, Lane replied, but misplaced. Lieutenant Mason, please escort Mr. Carter to processing. The warrant for his arrest should be coming through shortly. No, Hayes stated firmly. That's not happening. The room went still, the confrontation reaching its tipping point. Lane's expression hardened. That sounded remarkably like insubordination, Chief Hayes. Call it what you want. Mr. Carter is leaving with me. Now. Mason moved toward Darius, but Hayes blocked his path. For a tense moment, it seemed the situation might turn physical. Lane broke the silence. This is disappointing, Malcolm. I expected better judgment from you. And I expected basic integrity from this department, Hayes countered. We're both disappointed. Just then, Hayes's phone buzzed. He checked the message, a slight smile forming. It seems the district attorney has concerns about the warrant request for Mr. Carter. She's put a hold on it pending review of the evidence chain. Lane's composure slipped momentarily, anger flashing in his eyes. That's temporary. Perhaps, Hayes agreed. But it gives us time to examine how cocaine appeared in a vehicle that was clean during the initial search. I'm sure the body cam footage will be enlightening. Oh wait, those cameras malfunctioned, didn't they? This isn't over, Lane stated, his voice low and dangerous. On that we agree, Hayes replied. He turned to Darius. Let's go. As they left Mason's office, Hayes nodded to several officers in the bullpen, silent signals to allies in a divided department. Darius noted which officers returned the gesture, mentally cataloging potential friends and foes. They were almost at the exit when Officer Johnson approached, subtly pressing a folded paper into Darius's hand while pretending to stumble. "Sorry, sir," he mumbled before hurrying away. Outside in the parking lot, Darius unfolded the note. "Storage room B, locker 42. Password, Hayes 1984. He showed it to Hayes. "What's in locker 42? Darius asked. "I don't know," Hayes admitted. "But we need to find out. Johnson's risking his career, maybe more." After retrieving the contents of locker 42, a flash drive with incriminating body cam footage, they went to inspect the vandalism at Darius's office. Computer screens were smashed, furniture overturned, and spray painted across the main wall were the words, "Know your place." Darius surveyed the destruction, his expression hardening into resolve. "This was meant to scare me." "Is it working?" Hayes asked quietly. "No," Darius replied after a moment. "It's making me angry." Hayes held up the flash drive they'd retrieved. "This contains footage not just from your arrest, dozens of incidents dating back months, all showing the same pattern." "Evidence of the targeting Reggie described?" Hayes nodded grimly. "And more. Sullivan and his crew discussing payoffs, Lane, giving direct orders to harass specific business owners." He looked Darius directly in the eyes. "This is it, the evidence we need to take Lane down." As they left the office, neither man noticed the black sedan parked across the street, its driver watching their departure through the lens of a high-powered camera. Inside the vehicle, the observer spoke into a phone. "They found the flash drive." "Yes, sir. They're heading out now." "No, they don't appear intimidated." "Understood, Commissioner. I'll continue surveillance." Deputy Commissioner Lane hung up, turning to face Mason and Sullivan in his office. "The warning didn't work. Carter's still in the game." "What's our next move?" Mason asked. Lane's expression was cold and calculating. "Escalation. If Carter won't back down willingly, we'll have to make the cost unbearable." He turned to Sullivan. "It's time for Phase 2. "The family?" Sullivan asked, his tone revealing his discomfort for the first time. "Not yet," Lane replied, "but everything else is fair game. His reputation, his business, his freedom." He picked up a file from his desk. "And I have just the leverage we need." The battle lines were drawn. In Hayes's office, the chief and Darius reviewed the body cam footage, building their case one damning piece of evidence at a time. In Lane's corner, the corrupt network mobilized, preparing to destroy anyone who threatened their operation. The war for the soul of the department, and perhaps the city itself, had begun in earnest. And for Darius Carter, what started as a simple parking ticket had evolved into something far more significant. A fight for justice that would test not only his friendship with Hayes, but everything he believed about the system meant to protect and serve. Evening shadows stretched across Darius's living room as he paced, phone pressed to his ear. After the vandalism at his office, Hayes had insisted on a security detail for Darius's home. 2 officers he personally vetted, now stationed. Outside. Through the window, Darius could see their patrol car, a reminder that the conflict had escalated beyond a simple arrest. "Everything's secure at the secondary office," Trevor, his attorney, assured him. "We've implemented the security measures you requested, and I've got our IT team scanning for breaches hourly." "And the hospital contract?" Darius asked, concern evident in his voice. Some nervous whispers, but nothing concrete. "I've reached out personally to reassure them." After ending the call, Darius found Vanessa in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, eyes distant with worry. "You should take the kids to your mother's," he suggested gently. Vanessa looked up, her expression resolute. "We're not running, Darius. This is our home." "It's not about running. It's about being smart." He sat beside her, taking her hands. "Lane and his people are dangerous. They've already vandalized the office. And if we scatter, they win, Vanessa countered. Besides, Malcolm has officers watching the house. Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Through the security monitor, Darius recognized Hayes, looking even more worn than that morning. He buzzed him in. Hayes entered, declining. Vanessa's offer of coffee with a tired wave. I can't stay long. Things are moving quickly. In Darius's home office, away from Vanessa's concerned ears, Hayes revealed the developments. The footage is authentic, he confirmed. Johnson's been secretly documenting Sullivan and his crew for months. We have clear evidence of pattern and practice, targeted harassment, falsified reports, explicit orders from Lane. Enough to take to the DA? Hayes's expression tightened. That's where it gets complicated. Our city prosecutor, James Wilson, is deep in Lane's pocket. His wife's real estate company has exclusive contracts for developments in revitalized neighborhoods. The same neighborhoods where black business owners are being pushed out, Darius noted. Exactly. And with most of the evidence coming from Johnson's unauthorized recordings, it might not be admissible, Darius finished, understanding the UB legal hurdle. We need more. Properly obtained, unimpeachable evidence. Hayes rubbed his temples. And we need to protect Johnson. Lane will know someone inside provided that footage. Darius considered their options. What about the mayor? Could he intervene? Mayor Parker is playing both sides. He won't openly oppose Lane. There's too much money involved in these development projects. But he also can't afford the scandal if Lane's operation becomes public. Hayes paced the small office. He's waiting to see who wins before choosing a side. So we're on our own. Not entirely. I've got allies in the department, good cops who've been watching Sullivan's crew with disgust. And I have contacts at the FBI. If we can build a strong enough case that this crosses into federal SAU jurisdiction, Lane loses his local protection. Darius nodded. Smart. As they strategized, Darius's phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. Meeting tomorrow, North Shore Diner. 7 a.m. Come alone. Proof of Lane's corruption. Darius showed Hayes the message. Could be a trap. Or it could be our breakthrough. Hayes studied the text. I'll have plainclothes officers secure the location beforehand. You won't be alone, no matter what this says. After Hayes departed, Darius rejoined Vanessa in the living room. She had CNN playing, the volume low. Anything new? He asked, settling beside her. Nothing about your case, if that's what you mean. She leaned against him. But I've been thinking, we should go public with what happened. Get ahead of whatever story Lane might spin. Darius considered this. The instinct to protect his privacy warred with the strategic advantage of controlling the narrative. You may be right, he admitted. But we need to be careful about how we frame it. As they discussed options, Darius's phone rang, an unknown number. Mr. Carter, a woman's voice greeted him. My name is Sonia Pierce. I'm a reporter with the Tribune. I understand you were recently subject to a controversial arrest. Darius straightened. How did you get this number? A source provided it, along with some concerning details about your case. Her tone was professional but sympathetic. I'd like to hear your side of the story. Darius met Vanessa's eyes, a silent exchange passing between them. This could be the opportunity they needed, or a trap set by Lane. I'm interested in talking, Darius replied carefully. But first, I need to know more about your source. You know I can't reveal that, Pierce responded. But I can tell you, there's someone inside the 8th Precinct who's concerned about patterns of harassment against minority business owners. That narrowed the possibilities. Johnson, possibly, or another officer with a conscience. Darius made a decision. Meet me tomorrow at my attorney's office. I'll text you the address. After the call, Vanessa squeezed his hand. Are you sure about this? No, Darius admitted. But Lane's already moving against us. At least this way we control how the story breaks. Across town, in a dimly lit bar popular with off-duty officers, Sullivan and Winters nursed beers in a corner booth, their conversation low and tense. This is getting out of hand, Winters muttered, glancing nervously around the room. We were supposed to pressure some black businesses, not start a war with the chief of police. Sullivan snorted. Getting cold feet, rookie? This is the job. Harassment. And evidence planting weren't in the job description. Grow up, Sullivan snapped. You think cops make it on salary alone? Lane's operation has been running smooth for years. One connected black guy isn't going to change that. Winters wasn't convinced. Hayes isn't backing down, and now someone's leaking body cam footage? Lane's handling it, Sullivan assured him, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Besides, we're too far in to back out now. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mason, his expression grave. We have a problem, he announced without preamble. The reporter, Pierce. She's asking questions about Carter's arrest. Specific questions, Sullivan cursed. How did she get details? Someone's talking. Mason's gaze swept the bar, as if the traitor might be among them. Lane wants her stopped before the story breaks. Stopped how? Winters asked, alarm evident in his voice. However necessary, Mason replied coldly. Pierce lives in Westview Apartments, Unit 307. Lane wants you two to pay her a visit tonight. Make it clear that pursuing this story would be unhealthy. Sullivan nodded, but Winters tailed. Intimidating a reporter? That's crossing a line, Lieutenant. Mason fixed Winters with a hard stare. The line was crossed the moment you joined Sullivan's unit. You're either with us or against us. There's no middle ground here. After Mason departed, Winters drained his beer, conflict evident on his face. I didn't sign up for this. Yes, you did, Sullivan countered. The moment you took that envelope of cash after your first special assignment. We all did. Meanwhile, at police headquarters, Hayes worked late into the night, reviewing personnel, files looking for officers he could trust for the operation at North Shore Diner. His concentration was broken by a knock at his door. Come in, he called, quickly minimizing the files on his screen. Officer Tanya Rodriguez entered, closing the door behind her. As Internal Affairs' youngest detective, she had a reputation for incorruptibility that had made her few friends but earned Hayes's respect. You wanted to see me, Chief? Have a seat, Rodriguez. Hayes gestured to the chair across from his desk. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Rodriguez nodded, her expression serious. Understood. Hayes outlined the situation. Darius's arrest, the evidence of systemic harassment, Lane's corruption network. Rodriguez listened without interruption, her face betraying nothing. I need someone in IA I can trust, Hayes concluded. Someone who can investigate Sullivan and his crew without tipping off Lane. That won't be easy, Rodriguez admitted. Lane has people everywhere, including my department. I know. That's why I'm asking you directly. Your record speaks for itself. Rodriguez considered this. If what you're saying is true, this goes beyond police misconduct. This is organized crime with badges. Exactly. And I need proof that will stand up in court. I'll need resources, authorization to conduct surveillance. You'll have whatever you need, Hayes assured her. But it has to be completely off the books for now. Lane can't know we're investigating. Rodriguez studied Hayes, weighing her options. This could end both our careers if it goes sideways. It could end more than our careers if Lane realizes what we're doing, Hayes countered grimly. But doing nothing isn't an option anymore. After a moment's consideration, Rodriguez nodded. I'm in. But we do this by the book. No shortcuts, no compromising evidence. If we're going after Lane, it has to be airtight. Agreed. Hayes handed her a secure phone. Use this to contact me. It's encrypted, untraceable. As Rodriguez left, Hayes turned back to his computer, accessing a hidden folder of files, records. He'd been compiling on Lane for months. Surveillance photos, financial discrepancies, reported incidents that disappeared from official records, pieces of a puzzle that was finally taking shape. His phone buzzed with a text from Darius. Reporter from Tribune reached out, meeting her tomorrow. Hayes replied quickly, be careful. Lane may have eyes on the media too. In her apartment across town, Sonia Pierce reviewed her notes on the Carter case, unaware of the conversation about her taking place at the officer's bar. She'd been tracking complaints against the 8th Precinct for months, piecing together a pattern that pointed to systematic harassment of minority business owners. Her research was interrupted by a knock at her door. Checking the peephole, she saw a delivery man holding a package. "Delivery for Pierce," he called through the door. Cautiously, she opened the door, keeping the chain engaged. "I didn't order anything." "Courtesy package," the man explained, holding up a wrapped box. "From an admirer of your work." Intrigued but wary, Pierce accepted the package, signing for it before closing and relocking her door. Inside the box, she found a USB drive and a note. "Evidence against Lane. Publish at your high own risk." Across the city, the key players in the unfolding drama prepared for the next day's confrontations, unaware that events were accelerating beyond anyone's control. Morning light spilled through the windows of North Shore Diner as Darius sat in a corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The meeting was set for 7 a.m., but he'd arrived 30 minutes early, watching each new customer with cautious scrutiny. Hayes had been true to his word. 3 plainclothes officers were strategically positioned throughout the diner, their presence providing a measure of security without being obvious. At precisely 7 a.m., the bell above the door chimed. A middle-aged, white woman entered, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun, her movements confident as she scanned the diner. Her gaze landed on Darius, recognition flickering in her eyes. She approached his table. "Mr. Carter." Darius nodded cautiously. "And you are?" "Linda Bennett." She slid into the booth opposite him. "I worked as Deputy Commissioner Lane's administrative assistant for 8 years, until yesterday when I resigned." "You're taking a risk meeting me," Darius observed. Bennett's smile was tight. "I've been taking risks for months, copying files, recording conversations. Lane's operation isn't just unethical, Mr. Carter. It's criminal. Why come forward now?" "Because of you," she replied simply. "When I saw what they did to you, a respected businessman with no criminal history, I knew it had gone too far." She slid a thumb drive across the table. "Everything's here. Financial records, meeting minutes, Lane's personal files on targeted businesses. The Urban Renewal Project is just a cover for systematic extortion and property theft." Darius pocketed the drive. "Why give this to me instead of Internal Affairs or the FBI?" "Because Lane has people in both," Bennett explained. "And because you have Hayes. The chief might be the only person with enough authority and integrity to actually do something with this information." Before Darius could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call from Vanessa. He excused himself to answer. "Darius, someone broke into our house," Vanessa's voice was shaking. "The security officers, they're both unconscious. I'm locked in the bathroom with the kids." Cold fear gripped Darius. "Have you called 911? "Yes, they're sending officers. But Darius, whoever did this is still in the house. I can hear them." "Stay hidden," he instructed, signaling urgently to the plainclothes officers. "I'm on my way." Ending the call, he turned to Bennett. "I have to go. Emergency at home. Is there a way to contact you?" She handed him a burner phone. "My number's programmed. And be careful, Mr. Carter. Lane won't stop until you're destroyed, or he is." The drive to Darius's home was a blur, Hayes meeting him there with a full tactical team. They arrived to find 3 patrol cars already on scene, officers securing the perimeter. "Vanessa and the kids are safe," an officer informed them as they approached. "The intruders fled before we arrived. Inside, the house had been ransacked, furniture overturned, drawers emptied, walls defaced with spray-painted threats. In the living room, 2 security officers were being treated by paramedics, both suffering from concussions after being attacked from behind. Vanessa sat on the couch, arms around their 2 children, her expression a mixture of fear and fury. When she saw Darius, she rose to embrace him. "They took your laptop," she reported, "and the safe in your office was opened." "Did you see them?" Hayes asked gently. "No," Vanessa replied, "but I heard one of them make a call. He said, 'Tell Lane it's done.' That's when I knew this wasn't a random break-in." Hayes' expression hardened. "This is direct retaliation. Lane's escalating faster than I anticipated." He's scared, Darius realized. Bennett's evidence, Johnson's recordings, the Tribune story in the works. He's losing control of the narrative. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a forensics team. As they began processing the scene, Hayes pulled Darius aside. You need a secure location. Lane's shown he's willing to target your family. I'm not hiding, Darius insisted. That's exactly what he wants. It's not hiding. It's tactical retreat, Hayes argued. Just until we can move against Lane formally. Before they could continue. Hayes's phone rang. His expression grew increasingly grim as he listened. When? He demanded. Is he alive? Yes. Secure the scene. No one in or out except our people. He ended the call, his face ashen. Officer Johnson was just found in the precinct parking garage, beaten within an inch of his life. Darius absorbed this news with growing anger. Lane's tying up loose ends. Johnson's the whistleblower who provided the body cam footage, Hayes explained to Vanessa. This attack was meant as a warning to others who might speak out. Darius made a decision. We need to accelerate our timeline. Bennett's evidence, Johnson's footage, Sonia Pierce's reporting. We need to use it all. Now, before Lane can do more damage. I agree, Hayes said grimly. Lane's getting desperate, which makes him even more dangerous. As they strategized, Darius received a call from Sonia Pierce. Mr. Carter. Her voice was urgent. Someone broke into my apartment last night. They took my research on the 8th precinct. Are you all right? Yes, I wasn't home, but they left a message, a note saying I should mind my own business if I want to stay healthy. She paused. I'm still running the story. My editor's giving it front-page treatment for tomorrow's edition. But you should know. They're coming, after anyone connected to this case. After the call, Darius turned to Hayes. Pierce is still publishing despite being threatened. We need to make sure she has protection. Already on it, Hayes assured him. I've assigned officers I trust personally. What about Carla Brooks? Vanessa suggested. She handled that police brutality case last year, won a 7-figure settlement. The civil rights attorney? Hayes considered this. Good thinking. With her involved, this becomes more than an internal police matter. It's a public civil rights case. Darius made the call. Carla Brooks listened intently before responding with characteristic directness. I've been tracking patterns at the 8th precinct for years, she revealed. Your case could be the key to breaking it open. I'll meet you at my office in 2 hours. As preparations accelerated, Lane was holding an emergency meeting with his inner circle, Mason, Sullivan, and several others whose careers and freedom now hinged on silencing Darius and Hayes. The reporter has evidence, Lane informed them, his usual composure cracking. And Carter met with Linda this morning. Bennett? Mason looked shocked. Your assistant? She's involved in this? Apparently she's been collecting information for months, Lane confirmed bitterly. Recordings, documents, financial records. Sullivan leaned forward. Johnson's out of commission. Bennett and the reporter are next. No, Lane countermanded. No more direct attacks. It's drawing too much attention. We need something more definitive. What did you have in mind? Mason asked. Lane's expression was cold. Carter's the linchpin. Without him, Hayes lacks a victim for his crusade. The evidence becomes circumstantial. He turned to Sullivan. I want him discredited. Completely. How? The drug charges were a start, but we need more. Financial impropriety, professional misconduct, personal scandal, whatever it takes. Lane's voice hardened. By the time we're done, no one will believe a word Carter says. Sullivan nodded. Consider it done. Meanwhile, at Carla Brooks's downtown office, Darius, Hayes, and Vanessa presented their evidence. Bennett's files, Johnson's recordings, Pierce's research. Brooks reviewed it with practiced efficiency, her expression growing increasingly determined. This is extraordinary, she declared finally. Not just harassment or isolated misconduct, this is a criminal enterprise operating within the police department. Can we stop them? Vanessa asked. With this evidence? Brooks nodded confidently. We can do more than stop them. We can destroy them. She turned to Hayes. But you understand what this means for the department? The scandal will be unprecedented. I'm prepared for that, Hayes replied grimly. The department needs cleaning out top to bottom, no matter the cost. As they formalized their strategy, Darius received an urgent call from Trevor, his attorney. Darius, they've frozen your company's accounts, Trevor reported, disbelief evident in his voice. The DA's office just issued subpoenas for all your financial records. They're claiming money laundering and tax evasion. That's ridiculous, Darius protested. Our books are completely clean. I know that, but they're moving fast. This has Lane written all over it. After relaying this development to the others, Darius faced a moment of doubt. Lane's hitting us from all sides. If he freezes our assets, we can't fight back effectively. That's why we need to go public immediately, Brooks insisted. Once this evidence is in the open, Lane loses his advantage of secrecy. Hayes agreed. Pierce's article breaks tomorrow. We should coordinate with that. Have Brooks announce the lawsuit the same day, while I initiate formal departmental charges against Lane and his officers. As they solidified their counterattack, the weight of what they were undertaking settled over the room. They were challenging not just corrupt officers, but an entrenched system that had operated with impunity for years. Lane won't go down without a fight, Hayes warned. He'll use every resource at his disposal to destroy us. Let him try, Darius replied, his resolve hardening. Some fights are worth the cost. That evening, as Sonia Pierce put the finishing touches on her exposé, Officer Johnson lay in a hospital bed under guard, and Lane dispatched his operatives to undermine Darius's reputation. The battle lines were drawn for what would become the most significant police corruption case in the city's history. The war that began with a parking ticket was about to reshape the city's power structure forever. Dawn painted the city skyline in hues of pink and gold as Darius's security team escorted him and his family to the mayor's office. After the break-in at their home, Hayes had insisted on moving them to a secure location, a downtown hotel suite with round-the-clock protection from officers he personally vetted. The early meeting with Mayor Parker hadn't been easy to arrange. The mayor's assistant had initially refused, citing a packed schedule, until Hayes mentioned they would be bringing Linda Bennett and her evidence directly to the FBI if the mayor was too busy to address police corruption in his city. The mayor's corner office offered a panoramic view of the city he governed, a city where justice had become a commodity, sold to the highest bidder. Mayor Frank Parker, a silver-haired politician with an easy smile and calculating eyes, greeted them with practiced warmth that didn't quite reach his gaze. Chief Hayes, Mr. Carter, he nodded, gesturing to the conference table. And Mrs. Carter, I understand there was an incident at your home. I'm deeply sorry. With all due respect, Mayor, Darius replied. We need more than sympathy. We need action. Hayes placed a thick folder on the table. This contains evidence of systemic corruption within the department, specifically centered around Deputy Commissioner Lane and officers at the 8th Precinct. Parker's professional smile faltered. These are serious allegations, Chief. They're not allegations, Vanessa interjected, sliding crime scene photos across the table. This is what Lane's people did to our home. This is what they did to Officer Johnson for speaking out. The mayor examined the photos, his expression giving nothing away. And you're certain Lane is behind this? We have recordings, Darius stated flatly. Financial records, witness testimony. Lane has been running a criminal operation within the department for years, targeting minority business owners to facilitate gentrification projects that benefit his associates. Associates that include some of your biggest campaign donors, Hayes added pointedly. Parker's jaw tightened. Careful, Chief. That sounds dangerously close to accusing me of complicity. Not complicity, Hayes countered. Willful ignorance. Perhaps, but that ends today. For a tense moment, silence filled the opulent office. Parker studied each face before him, weighing his options with the calculation of a career politician. What exactly are you asking for? He finally asked. Lane's immediate removal, Hayes replied without hesitation. Pending a full investigation by an independent prosecutor. Parker leaned back, steepling his fingers. You understand what you're asking? Lane has powerful connections throughout the state. The political fallout would be significant. The fallout from ignoring police corruption would be worse, Vanessa countered, especially once Sonia Pierce's article hits tomorrow's front page. At the mention of the reporter's name, Parker's composure cracked slightly. The Tribune is running a story on this? Complete with documentation, Darius confirmed. And Carla Brooks is filing a federal civil rights lawsuit this afternoon. Parker stood abruptly, moving to the window. For several minutes, he stared out at the city, weighing political calculations. Only he could see. When he turned back, his expression had hardened into resolve. "I can't remove Lane based solely on your evidence," he declared. "Not without due process." "Mayor," Hayes began, but Parker raised a hand. "However," he continued, "I can authorize an emergency oversight committee to review these allegations immediately, and I can ensure Lane is temporarily reassigned during the investigation." "That's not enough," Darius argued. "Lane will use that time to destroy evidence and intimidate witnesses." "It's all I can offer officially," Parker replied, then lowered his voice. "Unofficially, I won't interfere with your investigation. And if you can get concrete evidence that stands up in court, I'll support whatever actions are necessary." It wasn't the decisive victory they'd hoped for, but it was more than they'd expected. As they left City Hall, Darius turned to Hayes. "He's hedging his bets," Darius observed, "keeping options open depending on which way the wind blows." "That's politics," Hayes replied grimly. "But he gave us what we need most, time and space to build our case without his interference." As their security detail escorted them to waiting vehicles, Hayes received an urgent call from Tanya Rodriguez. "Chief," her voice was tense, "you need to get to Memorial Hospital immediately. It's Officer Johnson. He's awake and talking, but Lane's people are trying to get to him." "Secure his room," Hayes ordered. "No one enters without my direct authorization." When they arrived at Memorial Hospital 20 minutes later, they found Rodriguez outside Johnson's room, alongside two officers Hayes trusted implicitly. "Status?" Hayes demanded. "Two plainclothes officers from the 8th tried to enter 10 minutes ago," Rodriguez reported. "Claimed they were providing official protection. When I refused access, they made a call. I'm guessing to Lane or Mason." "Is Johnson secure?" Rodriguez nodded. "For now. But he's scared, Chief. Says he has more evidence, things he didn't include on the flash drive. Names, dates, locations of payoffs." "I need to speak with him," Hayes decided. Inside the hospital room, Officer Johnson lay propped against pillows, his face a patchwork of bruises and cuts. Despite his injuries, his eyes brightened with recognition when Hayes entered. "Chief," he greeted weakly. "Thought they might have gotten to you too." "Not yet," Hayes replied, pulling a chair beside the bed, "though not for lack of trying." Over the next 30 minutes, Johnson provided critical new information, details that connected Lane directly to the harassment operation, names of state-level politicians involved in the real estate developments, and the location of additional evidence he'd hidden. "There's a hard drive," Johnson explained, voice barely above a whisper. "Hidden in my apartment, under the floorboard beneath my bed. Everything's there, the complete record." "I'll send Rodriguez to secure it immediately," Hayes promised. Johnson gripped Hayes' wrist with surprising strength. "Be careful, Chief. Lane has someone in your inner circle. I don't know who, but there's a reason he's always one step ahead." This revelation sent a chill through Hayes. The idea that someone close to him was feeding information to Lane explained much about the deputy commissioner's uncanny ability to anticipate their moves. As Hayes left Johnson's room, he found Darius in intense conversation with Carla Brooks, who had arrived minutes earlier. "The grand jury hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning," Brooks informed them. "I've secured court orders protecting all our key witnesses, including Johnson and Bennett." "And Pierce's article?" Darius asked. "Running in tomorrow's early edition," Brooks confirmed. "I've coordinated with her editor to ensure the timing aligns with our filing." Hayes pulled them aside, lowering his voice. "Johnson says Lane has someone in my inner circle. A mole." That explains how they knew about the meeting with Bennett, Darius realized, and possibly how they found your safe during the break-in. "We Need to limit information to only those we absolutely trust, Hayes decided. From now on, critical details stay between the people in this hallway. As they continued strategizing, Hayes's phone rang. Officer Rodriguez. Chief. Her voice was breathless. I've secured Johnson's hard drive, but there's a problem. Lanes just issued an official order removing you from duty pending investigation of misconduct and abuse of authority. He's named himself acting chief, effective immediately. Hayes's expression darkened. On what grounds? He's claiming you interfered with legitimate arrests and investigations due to personal connections. He has statements from officers alleging you threatened them to protect Carter. Can he do that? Darius asked when Hayes relayed the news. Technically, the deputy commissioner can temporarily relieve the chief under extraordinary circumstances, Hayes explained. It's meant for scenarios where the chief is physically incapacitated or under criminal investigation. This is his countermove, Brooks observed. By removing you officially, he gains control of the department and access to your files. And the authority to shut down our investigation, Hayes added grimly. Darius checked his watch. The grand jury convenes in 18 hours. We need to hold Lane off until then. I know someone who can help, Hayes decided. An old friend at the Department of Justice. If we can get federal involvement, Lane's authority is superseded. While Hayes made his call, Darius received an urgent message from Trevor. Officer Winters had been found dead in his apartment, an apparent suicide. Suicide? Darius questioned skeptically. Or silencing a potential witness? Either way, it's convenient for Lane, Hayes noted after concluding his call. Winters was the most vulnerable of his crew. Young, possibly remorseful. If he'd decided to cooperate, another loose end tied up, Brooks concluded grimly. Lane's cleaning house. As evening approached, the hospital corridor became a makeshift command center. Rodriguez arrived with Johnson's hard drive. Trevor brought legal documents and Sonia Pierce joined them briefly to coordinate final details for her exposé. We've collected statements from 12 victims of the 8th Precinct's targeting, Pierce reported. Plus financial records showing suspicious property acquisitions following business closures in target neighborhoods. Combined with Johnson's evidence and Bennett's documents, it's overwhelming, Brooks confirmed. Lane may have political connections, but this is too big to bury. Their planning was interrupted when Hayes received word that Sullivan was on the move, headed to the state capitol to meet with political allies. He's running, Hayes realized. Lane must have told his inner circle to disappear until the storm passes. Or he's delivering evidence to someone with the power to shut down our investigation, Darius suggested. Either possibility was concerning. Hayes dispatched trusted officers to track Sullivan while maintaining their focus on the immediate threat, Lane's attempt to seize control of the department. As night fell, Lane made his next move. Darius received a call from Vanessa, who had returned to the hotel with their children under guard. There are officers here, she reported, her voice steady despite the tension. They have a warrant for your arrest, tax evasion and fraud. They're demanding I tell them where you are. Lane's trying to neutralize me before the grand jury, Darius realized, his heart racing. Are you and the kids safe? Yes, our security team is holding them in the lobby. But Darius, they're saying they have financial records showing you laundered money through the business. Fabricated evidence, Hayes assured them after Darius ended the call. But effective. If they arrest you now, Lane could potentially keep you from testifying tomorrow. I need to go underground, Darius decided. Just until the hearing. Hayes nodded grimly. I know a place they won't look, but we'll need to move now. As they prepared to leave the hospital through a service entrance, Brooks pulled Darius aside. Whatever happens tonight, she said firmly, be at the courthouse by 8 a.m. Without your testimony, this case loses its human center. I'll be there, Darius promised, no matter what. Across town, in his luxurious office, Lane orchestrated what he believed would be the final destruction of Hayes and Carter. With Sullivan headed to state officials with carefully crafted evidence of Hayes's misconduct, Mason coordinating the search for Darius, and political allies mobilized to discredit tomorrow's newspaper revelations, he felt confident in his position. Sir, his new assistant interrupted. State Senator Wilson is on line 1. Lane smiled as he picked up the phone. Senator, thank you for returning my call. I'm afraid we have a situation that requires your particular influence. The chess match continued through the night, each side moving pieces into position for what would be the decisive confrontation in the morning. The grand jury hearing that was meant to expose Lane's corruption had become a race against time, and a test of whether justice could prevail against a system designed to protect its own. The courthouse steps gleamed in the morning sunlight as Carla Brooks paced anxiously, checking her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The grand jury was scheduled to convene in 30 minutes, but there was still no sign of Darius. Any word? She asked Trevor, who was equally concerned. Nothing. Since last night, he replied grimly. Hayes was taking him to a secure location, but they should have arrived by now. Inside the courthouse, prosecutors huddled in urgent conversation. The lead attorney, a veteran prosecutor named James Reynolds, approached Brooks with visible tension. We have a problem, he announced without preamble. Our key witness, Officer Johnson, hasn't arrived. His protection detail can't locate him. Lane, Brooks concluded immediately. He's neutralizing our witnesses. Without Johnson or Carter, this case is severely compromised, Reynolds acknowledged. Brooks made a swift decision. Move forward with Linda Bennett's testimony. She has enough documentation to establish the pattern. I'll keep trying to locate Darius. As they entered the courtroom, Brooks noticed several of Lane's allies in the gallery, including Mason and 2 state representatives known to be in his pocket. Lane himself was conspicuously absent, but his presence was felt in the confident smirks of his supporters. The proceedings began with the prosecutor outlining the case: systematic corruption within the police department, targeting of minority businesses, abuse of power at the highest levels. Bennett was called as the first witness, her testimony compelling as she detailed years of Lane's machinations. But without Johnson's first-hand account of police misconduct or Darius's personal experience, the human element that would sway the grand jury was missing. Brooks could see skepticism in some jurors' faces as the defense attempted to paint Bennett as a disgruntled employee with a vendetta. Halfway through Bennett's testimony, the courtroom doors opened. Every head turned as Darius entered, accompanied not by Hayes but by Officer Rodriguez. His appearance was haggard. Clearly he hadn't slept, but his expression was resolute. Brooks immediately called for a brief recess, pulling Darius and Rodriguez into a conference room. What happened? She demanded. Where's Hayes? Lane's people found our safe house, Rodriguez explained, her voice tight with suppressed anger. Someone must have followed us or tracked Hayes's phone. They came in shooting. Hayes? Brooks asked, dreading the answer. He's alive, Darius assured her quickly. But he took a bullet pushing me out the back. He's in surgery now. And Johnson? Rodriguez shook her head grimly. Missing. His protection detail was found unconscious in his hospital room. Johnson was gone. Brooks absorbed this with growing determination. Lane's getting desperate. These aren't the actions of someone confident in their position. What's our play? Darius asked. You testify, Brooks decided. Everything. The arrest, the harassment, the break-in. Make the jury see the human cost of Lane's corruption. When proceedings resumed, Brooks called Darius to the stand. His testimony was powerful in its simplicity. The story of a successful businessman targeted because of his race and connections, subjected to false arrests, fabricated evidence, and violent intimidation. Mr. Carter, Brooks asked, why do you believe you were targeted by officers from the 8th Precinct? Initially, I thought it was simple racial profiling, Darius replied honestly. But after comparing notes with other victims, speaking with Officer Johnson and Ms. Bennett, I realized it was strategic. They target successful minority business, owners whose properties are valuable to developers working with Lane and his associates. And the subsequent harassment? The break-in at your home? Retaliation, Darius stated firmly, for challenging their authority and exposing their operation. The defense attorney, a slick operator named Wilson clearly in Lane's pocket, approached for cross-examination. Mr. Carter, he began smoothly. "Isn't it true that Chief Hayes is a close personal friend? That he intervened in your arrest because of that friendship?" "He intervened because the arrest was unjust," Darius countered. "Our friendship gave me access to help that others in my position might not have had. That's the point. This system preys on those who can't fight back." Wilson changed tactics. "Let's discuss your business finances. Isn't it true that your company is currently under investigation for tax irregularities?" "An investigation initiated by Lane after I began cooperating with Chief Hayes," Darius replied calmly. "Based on fabricated evidence, just like the cocaine they claimed to find in my car after it was in police custody." The questioning continued, Wilson trying various angles to discredit Darius's testimony, but with each attempt, Darius's responses grew more confident, more compelling. The jury was engaged, clearly moved by his account. As the cross-examination neared its end, the courtroom doors burst open again. All heads turned to see Officer Johnson being wheeled in on a hospital gurney, accompanied by federal agents. Despite his injuries, he was conscious, his determined expression matching Darius's own. "Your Honor," the lead federal agent announced, "we have additional evidence and testimony critical to these proceedings." The judge, after a brief conference with both legal teams, allowed Johnson to testify from his gurney. His account of the corruption within the 8th Precinct, delivered in a voice weak but unwavering, corroborated everything Darius and Bennett had described. Deputy Commissioner Lane personally ordered the harassment of specific business owners, Johnson testified. He directed officers to plant evidence, falsify reports, and intimidate witnesses. "And the attack on you?" the prosecutor asked. "Officer Sullivan and 2 others assaulted me in the parking garage after learning I had provided evidence to Chief Hayes," Johnson confirmed. "They said Lane wanted to send a message to anyone thinking of talking." As Johnson's testimony concluded, Brooks introduced the hard drive Rodriguez had recovered from his apartment, containing videos, audio recordings, and documentation that left no doubt about Lane's culpability. The defense attorneys huddled in urgent conference, clearly recognizing their position was crumbling. One slipped out of the courtroom, presumably to contact Lane. "The prosecution calls one final surprise witness," Brooks announced. "Deputy Commissioner Gregory Lane." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Lane, of course, was not present, but the announcement sent a clear message that they were ready to confront him directly. The grand jury proceedings continued through the afternoon, with additional witnesses corroborating the pattern of corruption. By the time the jury retired to deliberate, the outcome seemed inevitable. Outside the courtroom, Darius received news that Hayes was out of surgery. The bullet had missed vital organs, and he was expected to recover fully. As relief washed over him, Darius's phone buzzed with an incoming news alert. "Police corruption exposed. Tribune investigation reveals systematic targeting of minority businesses." Sonia Pierce's article had hit the digital edition, timed perfectly with the grand jury proceedings. Within minutes, the story was being picked up by national outlets. "It's working," Darius told Brooks as they waited. "The pressure from multiple directions, the grand jury, the media, the federal agents, Lane can't fight on all fronts." "Speaking of Lane," Rodriguez approached, her expression grim but satisfied. "Federal agents just arrested him trying to board a private flight to the Cayman Islands. Apparently he had offshore accounts and was attempting to flee with millions in cash." The grand jury's decision came swiftly. Indictments for Lane, Sullivan, Mason, and multiple officers from the 8th Precinct on charges ranging from corruption and evidence tampering to assault and conspiracy. As Darius left the courthouse, reporters swarmed around him, shouting questions about his ordeal and the wider implications of the case. Standing on the steps where his journey for justice had culminated, Darius delivered a statement that would be replayed on news broadcasts across the country. "Today isn't just about holding corrupt officers accountable," he declared, Vanessa standing proudly beside him. "It's about changing a system that allowed this corruption to flourish. It's about ensuring that no one, regardless of their position or connections, is above the law." 3 weeks later, Darius visited Hayes at his home, where he was recovering from his wound. They sat on the back deck, sharing a quiet moment after the storm of media attention and legal proceedings that had followed the indictments. The mayor offered me a promotion, Hayes revealed, sipping sparingly from a glass of bourbon. Commissioner, with a mandate to reform the department. Are you taking it? Darius asked. Hayes nodded slowly. Someone has to rebuild what Lane destroyed. Might as well be someone who knows where all the bodies are buried. Literally in some cases, Darius added grimly, referring to the ongoing investigation that had uncovered evidence of even darker crimes within Lane's network. What about you? Hayes asked. Your business back on track? Better than ever, Darius. Confirmed. The publicity hasn't hurt, but more importantly, Carla Brooks and I are launching a foundation, supporting victims of police misconduct and funding accountability initiatives. Hayes raised his glass in approval. From parking ticket to systemic change, not bad for a month's work. As evening settled over the city, news played on Hayes's television, footage of a young officer at roll call in the reformed 8th Precinct, listening intently as a new supervisor emphasized community engagement and ethical policing. The reforms were beginning, slowly but surely. It won't be easy, Hayes acknowledged, watching the broadcast. Lane's network was extensive. We're still finding connections, still identifying officers involved. But it's happening, Darius countered. That's what matters. The system protected itself for years, but it wasn't invincible. As they contemplated the changes their Stand for Justice had initiated, both men recognized that the work was far from complete. Corruption hadn't been eliminated, merely exposed in one corner of one city. But it was a start, a crack in the foundation of institutional injustice that had stood for generations. And for Darius Carter, whose ordinary day had turned into an extraordinary battle, that was enough. The parking ticket that had nearly destroyed his life had ultimately led to something much more significant, a chance to reshape the very system that had targeted him, and to ensure that others would not face the same injustice. Justice, as it turned out, wasn't just about holding the guilty accountable. It was about building something better from the ashes of a broken system. What does it take for a system built on injustice to finally break? Sometimes a single act of courage creates the first crack. Sometimes it's friendship that withstands corruption's assault. And sometimes it begins with nothing more than a parking ticket. Perhaps the most unsettling question isn't whether justice prevailed in this case, but how many others never got the chance Darius had, those without connections, without resources, without a chief of police in their corner. Their stories remain untold. Their justice remains denied. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like and subscribe for more narratives that challenge our understanding of justice in America. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the most important stories are the ones that make us question the systems we take for granted and inspire us to demand better.